I'm Asha.
I'm Vishen Lakiani.
And we're talking about the path to waking up. Now, I remember many, many years ago reading this article about Oprah. She just started bringing on spiritual thought leaders, teachers, and her audience really sort of seemed to sort of struggle with grasping how this information, this course, or this book could actually work in their lives or resonate with them because maybe of the culture that they had or the religious upbringing that they had or where they lived in the world. And it was funny to actually see this conversation going down the line as they finished the course, and this was just one course, how their perception shifted with this radical change in who they were and how they were living and experiencing their life. Everything else became so much more deep and meaningful. And that was a very powerful thing for me to see this shift happening.
What you're talking about is when Oprah started bringing on guests like Eckhart Tolle onto her show. And people would come in skeptical because what he was talking about seemed woo-woo, it seemed spiritual, but they didn't really know what spiritual was because of the way they identified with spirituality through their upbringing or religion. But if you look at the world today, more and more people are realizing that this is an important part of being and that the pursuit of this creates magnified impact in almost every dimension of their life. And that's why waking up is so important.
And 1 in 3 American millennials actually see themselves as spiritual rather than religious. So why do you think the path of spiritual growth or waking up is so important and vital now?
Well, I think the millennial generation, as well as the older generation, is starting to untangle spirituality from religion. And they're starting to see the importance of being on a spiritual quest, not as in extracting yourself from the modern world and climbing up a mountain and finding a cave to meditate in for 20 years, but the quest of utilizing the right methods and ideas in spirituality as you go through day-to-day life, as a parent, as a boss, as an employee, as a worker, and seeing how these tools can magnify your impact, not just in what you do, but also in how you live and your pursuit for happiness. So why is it so important? Well, I had a conversation recently with the American philosopher Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber is the most cited philosopher in the world today with 25 books in 30 different languages. So our conversation wasn't on spirituality, it was actually on education. I asked Ken if we could redesign the human education system, what do we need to shift? And this is what Ken Wilber said.
There are yet higher levels of development or levels of consciousness, which only a very small portion of the population has developed to so far, such as the integral level. And we don't teach those because we mostly just aren't aware of them. So families don't teach them, education doesn't teach them, and the culture at large certainly doesn't teach them. So humanity is flying way under its full potential, simply because we do not educate for the whole or complete human being. We educate for just a small part, a slice, a fragment of what's possible for us. And we certainly see this with another element in the Aqua framework, namely states of consciousness. Because according to the great wisdom traditions around the world, not only do humans possess typical states of consciousness like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, they also possess profoundly high states of consciousness like enlightenment or awakening, so-called moksha, or SATORI, gnosis, metamorphosis, the great liberation. And none of our standard educational systems teach any of that. Now, all of these factors I've mentioned, from the good and the true and the beautiful, or I, we, and it, to multiple intelligences, to levels of development, to states of enlightenment or waking up, none of these are rare, isolated, esoteric, far out, strange, or occult. They're all some of the very most basic and most fundamental potentials of a human being everywhere. They're simply human 101. Yet we don't educate human 101. We educate something like human 1/10. So yes, I firmly believe that we could bring about health on this planet, for the planet and for the humans on it, if we started educating the whole person with all their fundamental potentials and capacities and skills, and stop this fragmented, partial, broken system that we have now.
So as you can see, what Ken Wilber said is that we should be educating for the whole, but instead we're just educating for a slice of who we are as a human being.
And if you actually look at all the fairy tales that we get brought up with as well, all the fear and the sort of things that can happen to us if we misbehave, if we do things wrong, that keep us sort of squashed down. I think the thing that might be confusing is that in this information technology era that we're all living in, there's just so much information out there. There's just so many different theories, so many different books, ways of thinking, ways of living, that it's sometimes really hard to know where to start, how to get on that path to waking up, and why should we even be thinking about it in the first place? I mean, really, does it matter to us?
In a way, yes, because waking up is the ultimate pain reduction mechanism. So you asked a really interesting question. What is the path to waking up, and why should we be on that path? I've interviewed hundreds of people. I've read thousands of books, perhaps, but the best answer I've seen to this question comes from Michael Beckwith. So Michael Beckwith, and we're going to play a quick clip of him in a moment. Michael Beckwith talks about a concept called SATORI versus KENSHO. See, there are two ways to waking up. You can wake up through a sudden awakening. In cultural traditions, they call that SATORI. SATORI is when you suddenly have that aha, enlightenment moment, and you've up-leveled. But there's also the way most of us wake up, which is KENSHO. It's from trial and error. As we go through life, we gain sudden insights. Maybe a person we really adored when we were a teenager breaks our heart. Well, that's waking up it's happened to you, right? That's waking up in a tiny way because it teaches us to be more resilient. Maybe we lose a job or we lose a company. That's waking up in a tiny way because we learn something from it. So KENSHO is a slow, sometimes tremendously painful way of waking up, but there are faster ways. You can wake up through pain, or you can wake up through inspiration. What if we could more consistently through life wake up through aha moments, through inspiration, through insights? This is what happens when you pursue spiritual growth. The pain goes down, but the inspiration goes up, and you wake up, you up-level through this inspiration. Michael Beckwith puts it together in an amazing way.
There's two ways. There's SATORI and there's KENSHO. SATORI is an immediate waking up. Suddenly, you see life one way, something happens in your interiority, and you see the way it is. And then KENSHO is when it happens slowly. Most people are having a KENSHO experience. That is, they're having an incremental insights, and little by little, they see that they're more enlightened today than they were last year. For me, it was a dramatic SATORI moment where I could see my connectedness with the presence. I could see my connectedness with all of life. There was no separation, and I could not get back in the proverbial box. So that sense of awakening shattered my perception of reality. The fears, the doubts, the worries, the nagging things that bother human beings were suddenly gone. And all the things I used to worry about, it was like a fantasy. It was like, why was I worried about those things? Why was I worried about death? It doesn't even exist. Why was I worried about loss? You never lose anything significant. Why was I, human beings have this incessant worry about things, always in the future. And that dissolved. It disintegrated at that moment. So I went on a research to discover what had happened to me. And then I bumped into the sacred teachings of many people, as you're talking about, that have had this awakening experience. So what happens is perception expands and you see more of what's real. When I talk about real, I talk about capital R, real. That is, that which is real, that which is eternal, that which is changeless, causeless, birthless, deathless, that which is forever. Not the little reality that we make up for ourselves, but that which is real, never changes up on you. And so your question is, can the average person have this awareness? Absolutely. Everyone is a spiritual being. Everyone is luminous. Everyone carries the light. And everyone is on a path to wake up to their essential nature. So yes, the average, so-called average person is on a path of awakening, and you awaken two ways. One is through pain, and one is through insight. And so the average person basically wakes up through pain. They get sick and tired of being sick and tired, or there's so much pain or suffering that they come to the end of their proverbial road. They ask a question, you know, what's happening to me? Why can't I be happy? How can I be happy? How can I have more in life? And once they begin to ask those questions, the universe, which is friendly, starts to operate on their behalf, and synchronicity begins to happen. Spontaneous goodness begins to happen. Serendipity begins to happen. And things come into their path like breadcrumbs that pull them into a state of greater and greater awakening. And when they look back, they realize that pain forced them to ask some different questions about life, because what they were doing and what they were having at that time just didn't bring it to them. So there's pain, and then there's insight. Sometimes an individual will have a moment of such sobriety, such clarity. They may look at a sunset, they may see a beautiful picture, they may hear a fantastic song, they may come into agape and hear a message, they may see a bit of choreography, they may look into the beauty of a crystal, and suddenly they may have an insight about the nature of reality, about the nature of their connection, and they can't let it go. They can't get back in the box. Something has happened. And now they go on a hunt to discover what that means for them. But eventually, it's going to happen to everyone. Pain or insight, you're going to come through the door. Now, once you have a model of reality that is coherent with that which is real, and you have some systems for living, then you can begin to diminish the pain, and you begin to increase the bliss, because bliss is actually the function of the activation of your potential.
That was so beautifully put. Pain or bliss? I know which one I choose to actually have my awakening from, but I think it's so difficult, you know. X, Y, and Z we have to achieve in life. This denotes whether you're successful, whether you have your children, what kind of house you have, all these things. And you think, yeah, these things don't kind of matter. And, you know, growth and spiritual growth is really important. But at the other side of things, you're also constantly battling against all these boxes that you need to tick and going through these massive highs and lows. A lot of them, mostly lows, if you think about all these bumps in the road you have to go to. And I think that with these fairy tales that we've all sort of intrinsically sort of downloaded into our DNA, it's kind of really messed with the system of waking up, being able to wake up, choosing a path to wake up.
Right, because society tells you that you got to go through a certain path to achieve a good life. And that path often doesn't involve any idea of waking up. Instead, it involves things such as work hard, get good grades, graduate from high school, save up, go to college, incur huge student debt so that you can get a degree, which is a piece of paper so you can someday get a job. Now, all of those are means goals, but they are not end goals. And this is why, if you look at just America today, in a recent poll, something like 54% of people dislike their jobs. Now, the reason is because we are checking those boxes that society says we have to do and blindly following means goals. Now, there's a difference between a means goal and an end goal. Now, end goals are the things that really help us attain happiness. End goals are experiences, falling in love, raising kids, living in a new country. End goals could be growth. It could be the pursuit of enlightenment. It could be learning a new language. End goals could also be contribution, giving back to the world, starting a business that does something meaningful. But rather than set end goals, often people have no idea of what they want in life. And instead, they blindly pursue the means to that end. Now, here's a very, very important thing that happens when you start waking up. When you start waking up, you develop an auto-correction mechanism. So,
I love the sound of that.
So Joe Vitale is an amazing author. Joe Vitale used to be broke. He used to be sleeping in his car in Texas. Today, he is the author of multiple books. He's produced films. He just produced a country music record. But Joe Vitale, in one of my favorite books of his called Zero Limits, which talks about his explorations of spirituality with a Hawaiian mystic, talks about the difference between intention and inspiration. So Vitale says this, right? He says, most of us, as we are setting goals, set goals based on intention. We decide I want that car, I want that job, I want to be with that man or woman. But when you start waking up, you start tuning in to a deeper version of you, and you stop setting goals based on intention. Instead, you start setting goals based on inspiration. Inspiration guides you on where you should be. Inspiration guides you on who you should be with. Inspiration guides you on what is that path towards true happiness. You stop making missteps. This is why so many people keep changing jobs. So many people keep getting a divorce. If you look at the statistics today, by setting goals based on pure intention, we make mistakes. The average millennial changes jobs every 18 months. The average 50% of marriages in America end in divorce. Why? People are blindly setting goals by intention. But what if we can tune in and set goals based on inspiration? Now we start making the right decisions. It's a much faster path to prosperity, to happiness, to finding meaning in our lives, to attaining our life purpose. Ultimately, it's the quickest path to happiness and fulfillment. Intention versus inspiration. I'll let Joe explain this model.
First of all, I still like intentions. I think intentions help us stay on target because the way our brains work, they need some sort of guidance. We need something that tells us what we want in our lives. Otherwise, we're going to fall on a default setting. And the default setting in our brain is survival. That's it, survival. But if you want to have, do, or be more than survival, then having intentions is a great step forward. And so I like intentions, but I found something better. So much better that I now say intentions are for wimps. Intentions are for wimps. Because what's better than intention is what you just said, inspiration. So what's the difference? Intentions usually come from the ego. They usually are head-oriented. They're usually based on our past. They're based on something we did before, something we didn't achieve before, something somebody else did. So intentions come from our known reality. Inspirations come from the wider perspective of life itself. Inspirations come from your connection to what I call divinity. You mentioned the book Zero Limits, and in that book we talk about divinity. Some people can call that God, some people can call it nature, some people can call it your unconscious mind. But it is the energy field, the collective, that is bigger than just me and bigger than just you, though we are part of it. That essence has intelligence. And that essence is trying to guide us to something bigger and better than an intention. I say intentions are for wimps now because most of the time when we set an intention, they're kind of really small goals compared to what's possible. What's possible can only be known when you open your mind and allow this greater force to come in. And that greater force is going to inspire you. I find that intentions are great because they guide me where I want to go. But inspiration is rocket fuel, it's jet fuel, it's nuclear power. It comes up from within here and just propels you down the road. So I prefer inspirations, and then I will make my inspiration my intention.
That was really profound because I only just had a massive aha moment not so very long ago when I first started working with Vishen, and he asked me about what I wanted in my life, what was going to make me happy, and I was like, I had no idea, and I went into this panic mode about not knowing, not being able to put my finger on it, and then I suddenly thought, well, I can't figure that out, so I'm just going to focus on what I want to feel.
You hit on a really good point. So we spoke about intention versus inspiration. We talk about means goals versus end goals, right? To make sure you're pursuing an end goal, you don't ask yourself, what do I want? You ask yourself, how do I want to feel? And when you ask yourself, how do I want to feel? You open up the possibility of inner guidance getting you towards that feeling rather than your interpretation of a what getting you to that feeling.
And that's when I came across the concept of a feeling that I actually had never tasted before. And that was due to stumbling across this book by a guy called Rob Bresney, who's amazing. He wrote this book called Pronoia, The Antidote to Paranoia. And it's all about how the universe is conspiring for you to give you what you want. And I wanted to tap into that, and I had no idea how to make that happen. And it seems to me that possibly that's the next question is, how do we make that happen? And how do we make that happen now?
So one of the most interesting things that I've learned recently is the idea of inspiration and how inspiration comes to people and how inspiration often guides us to that, on that path that we need to be on. So I want to share this clip of Emily Fletcher. Emily Fletcher is one of the top meditation instructors in the world today. She has taught meditation at Google, at Harvard Business School, and I had a conversation with her recently on this idea. And this is why she says it's so important that when that inspiration comes and that we are in those states where the inspiration can flow easily, in other words, we are on that path, but when that inspiration comes, we listen to it.
I would say that the more you create, the more you put your attention on making things that are new, the more relevant you are. The more nature sees you as like, oh, this is someone who is carrying out the things that I view as most important. So I'm going to give them more of my support, more of my energy. You know how, here's a sort of funny story that I hope will illustrate this point. If you watch the documentary, This Is It, with Michael Jackson, you know, it was about Michael Jackson, they interview his manager. And he said that Michael used to call him all the time at like 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And the manager would say, like, Michael would be like, fireflies, we need fireflies. And his manager would be like, Michael, it's 4 in the morning. We'll just talk about this tomorrow. And Michael would say, no, I need you to write it down. I need you to get up and write it down, fireflies. And his manager would say, why? We'll talk about it tomorrow. And he'd be like, if we don't do it, Prince will. And I like this story because to me, it's illustrating that Michael was innovating at such a fast rate, at such a fast pace, but he knew that if he didn't take action, if he didn't lead with creation, that nature would look for someone else. It's like nature's just trying to create all the time, and it's looking for people who are awake. It's looking for people who are willing to raise their hands and bring something from the unmanifest into the manifest. And I don't think that it's choosy about who it is. It's like, well, if you don't do it, then fine, I'll choose this other person. And so this is why the more we create, the more of nature's support we get. It's like, imagine that nature's the CEO of the company, and then we're all the employees. And if you're the CEO of a company, which of your employees are you going to give the raise to? Which of your employees are you going to give the more important jobs to? The one that is asleep on the job and not executing on anything, or the one that is creating and executing and coming in with new ideas every day?
I love that the universe is just there waiting to rain inspiration down on you. You just got to be kind of there with your upside down umbrella catching it and doing something with it first before somebody else does. Because that's something that's so common, right? You hear people say.
So let's recap, right? So we spoke about the path to awakening. We spoke about how Ken Wilber has suggested that one of the biggest gaps in modern education is that we aren't educating for the whole, but we can start that. You can be on that path. We listened to Michael Beckwith talk about why this is important. It's the ultimate pain reduction mechanism. When you are pursuing spiritual growth, you grow, you expand yourself, you level up through inspiration and insight rather than pain. Doesn't mean pain will go away, but the pain is reduced. You have more peaks and less troughs. The third thing that we learned is why it's important to pursue this, because it opens you up to inspiration. And inspiration is better than intention in terms of helping you find your path in life. It guides you in a quicker way towards ultimate happiness. And finally, we heard Emily talk about why that inspiration can sometimes be a gift, and it can lead to major breakthroughs, but you got to be ready to jump on it, to listen to it, to activate it. So putting all of that together, we can see why this project we're working on is so important, the School for the Soul. We want to bring together many of the world's greatest teachers, many of these ideas, and help give people that consistent dose of insight, inspiration, new tools, new practices, new models, so that we can start waking up faster as a species.
There is no right or wrong way, really, is
Right.
there? There are so many different ways. It's just about getting on that path and taking that step of putting that one foot in front of each other and actually embarking on the process of waking up and just allowing that muse to show up, because the muse is there,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
The universe is our muse.
And I like to stay agnostic about the various practices or models for waking up. Some of them might come from tradition, some might come from modern philosophers, some might come from pop culture. I'd like to stay agnostic about the means, but the idea of waking up, that is one of the most powerful ideas any human being can embrace. So thank you for joining us on this journey.
So are you ready to join us on the path of waking up, to live a life inspired by the muse, to be part of a global movement that is Soulvana, the School for the Soul? Well, all you got to do is keep an eye on your inbox, because I'll be coming back with much more information about how you can have the chance to become a founding member of Soulvana.